Good morning. My video has gone live. I hope you can see and hear me. Great. So we've started with the chat box. Yes, hello. Hi, Tori. Thank you. And Tony, yes, general staff welfare policy in place. So good morning and welcome, and apologies for the delay in getting started. We're all so much reliant on technology at the moment, and so we just have to go with it. Unfortunately, things were a little bit slower getting started than previously. So this morning we are here to talk about how to support psychological well-being in the workplace, both during and post the coronavirus pandemic. So first of all, welcome to those of you that are attending this webinar or my webinars for the first time. And then secondly, welcome back to those of you that have returned for a second, third, or perhaps even fourth time. So you're very welcome. Those of you that aren't familiar with Crowdcast and haven't used it before, I'll just run through some of the logistics to begin with. So already I started the chat box that lets people see where that is. Those of you that have attended my webinars before will know that I do encourage you to get involved for this session, to be interactive using the chat box. You don't have the ability to speak with me through the webinar, but you do absolutely have the ability to communicate with me through the chat box, and I really encourage you to do that, or even to ask questions. What you'll see on the bottom left of your screen, there is a little icon there that says clip moment. So that allows you to clip a moment, which is 15 seconds, if you want to use that or share that, for example, on social media. So I think those are some of the basics to go through just in terms of using Crowdcast. There are 6 people on so far. We are expecting some more, but it is already 36 minutes past. So we will get started in terms of the session. So again, what I'm going to do is just to do a little bit of screen sharing here. And this is where hopefully we get things to work again. So let me just close that. And okay. So Crowdcast is a great tool in that it will enable the video to be shared immediately after the session. So those of you that want a copy of it, you'll be able to have that. The unfortunate thing is it allows you to only share once. I am having difficulty sharing at the moment. So I am just trying to think of another way now to get around that, just the difficulties with technology. So let's see what I can do to help with this. So just bear with me for a moment. Okay. Okay, so this is unfortunately a little bit of a problem, so apologies for that. for some reason I am having problems sharing the slides, but what I will do is I will share these at the end of the session. So why are we talking about supporting psychological well-being at this point in time? And the reason for that is we all know that everybody at the moment has been under extreme pressure and stress in terms of the coronavirus, and that has been for a variety of different reasons. Some of those people will be stressed because of the virus itself. Some people will be stressed because of the changes that have occurred in terms of their work and how they do their work and the reliance of technology. And one of the things that we do know is that stress for a prolonged period of time isn't good for us. So there could be people in your workplaces at the moment that have been under stress now because of the pandemic for the last 3 or 4 months, going back even to February. And what we know again from World War II, for example, or the Great Depression, is that stress most definitely not only has an impact on our psychological well-being, it also has an impact on our physical well-being. And that is stress, because of the fight or flight response, will cause arteries to reduce and to narrow. And also prolonged periods of stress also suppresses our immune system. So if you think about those two things, it could lead to autoimmune diseases, and also the fact that if people are under stress due to the fight or flight response and the arteries are narrowing, those arteries then are in both the heart and the brain, and that can then ultimately, stress can cause heart attacks and strokes. So if we look after our psychological well-being, then what we will find is our physical well-being should improve as a result of that. So for those of you who don't know me, I think if I just double check those of you that are on the call, a variety of you that do know me have met me before. There are some there that haven't. So I've been a business improvement specialist for over 20 years. I have been providing support in terms of people practices and also strategic planning in organisations. At the moment, some of the key things that I am helping organisations with is helping individuals to improve their psychological flexibility. That is the ability to experience unwanted thoughts and emotions, but still to be able to pursue life in the way that you would want. Also, what I do is help to create psychologically safe organisations as well. And that I do so using the pro-social matrix, which I know some of you that are attending at the moment have trained some of your managers to use that, or have had a taster session. And also the other thing is developing emotional intelligence, which is hugely key in terms of both psychological flexibility and psychological safety. So the purpose of this morning is to help you to understand what support you could provide in terms of psychological resilience in the workplace. And also really it is about the importance of good psychological health. Why is that important? And I've really started to outline that at the moment in terms of those details, even in terms of stress and anxiety and the impact those have on our physical health. So again, apologies for the inability to screen share at the moment, but I will share these with you at the end of the webinar. So if we started with the mental health facts, what we do know is, and we knew in advance of coronavirus, that mental ill health was increasing substantially. So if we looked at the labour force survey for 2018-19, there were 602,000 cases of work-related stress, depression and anxiety. So that really is substantial. Mental ill health is CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, will tell us that mental ill health is the #1 cause of long-term sickness absence. What we do know as well from the Department of Health is Northern Ireland is reported to have 25% higher prevalence of mental health problems than in England. And again, unfortunately, in Northern Ireland does have the world's highest rates of PTSD, and that's post-traumatic stress disorder. And some of that will come from, unfortunately, our historical problems. And what we do know is 1 in 4 in the UK are likely to experience a mental ill health problem each year. So in terms of mental ill health, we know that those facts, many of you have heard of those and know that those are increasing. And one of the things I wanted to share with you is the Wellbeing survey conducted by CIPD, which was released earlier this year. And in terms of some of the wellbeing facts at work, what we have seen as a trend over the last couple of years is the average number of days sick has been reducing. So there's a reduced sickness absence. Some of you may see that trend in your own organisations. However, on the other side of that, what we see is an increase in both presenteeism and leaveism. So presenteeism is people coming to work when ill and underperforming probably as a result. And leaveism is people conducting their work during even times of leave or outside of contracted hours. So we might say that might be some of the reason for sickness absence reducing. But because of the increased presenteeism and leaveism, that may also come from the fact that really the top 2 causes of stress identified in the survey were heavy workloads and management styles. So perhaps people feeling under pressure to perform, under pressure to meet the goals and targets that they have. And that also then combines with what they found was 86% cite the inability to switch off out of hours to be a problem and to be a contributor in terms of stress. So if you think about your own context and work and think about what might be going on at work. Hi, good morning. Sorry, I'm just checking the chat box. So good morning, Kate, you've joined us. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who have just joined us, I'm having a bit of problem with my screen sharing, so apologies for that. I will be talking you through this and I will share the slides at the end of the session. Even just in terms of context of all of this, so the Mental Health Foundation have conducted a recent survey looking at COVID-19, the financial inequality and mental health impact. And so what we know from this is, from this survey, we have 1 in 5 people surveyed are concerned about losing their jobs. So again, if we think about the stress that I talked about, the stress and anxiety that people have experienced or been experiencing for the last 3 or 4 months, one is the stress and then the anxiety about potentially losing their jobs, because people could see perhaps for some sectors a reduction in their workload, and some would have seen an increase in their workload. And an increase in their workload may have come because some of their colleagues have been furloughed. And so 1 in 3 adults in the UK are currently worried about their finances. And so, that even takes us, those of you that are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the minute, there are some people really that are just concerned with fulfilling the basic needs of being able to put food on the table, keep a roof over their head, and simply to survive. And so that is causing more stress and anxiety. So the stress and anxiety about work, and the stress and anxiety then about the financial concerns, about being able to provide then for the family. So that's just giving you a bit of context in terms of that. And even if we think about mental health and the law. So The law in terms of mental health, really, if you think about it at the moment, mental health sits under the health and safety legislation. So employers have a duty to protect the health, safety and welfare of their employees. Employees who have a mental health condition may be defined as disabled under the Disability Discrimination Act. Employers are also required to make reasonable adjustments for employees with disabilities. And then also employers have a duty to assess the risk and take measures to control those risks. So many of you at the moment maybe are thinking about a phased return to work and looking at some of the reasonable adjustments and the risk assessments. But I think if we think about those people that you have employed at the moment, some of you will have two groups of people. You may have people who are currently employed, working, have tasks to fulfill, responsibilities there. And on the other hand, you may have people who have been furloughed. And I just want to mention those people that are furloughed because they do come into consideration in terms of supporting their psychological well-being. And that is those staff that have been furloughed. Training and social contact with those people is permitted. In fact, I'd probably go as far to say that training and social contact is not just permitted, but it's essential. It is essential in terms of helping to maintain their well-being. Because while they're furloughed, you still as an employer have a duty of care. That duty of care still continues. And in terms of that duty of care, really what you need to do is you need to have a communication plan in terms of those people that are furloughed, rather than perhaps leaving those people in the dark and just communicating with them on issues around the furlough scheme. But is also to think about how can we keep those people included with the workforce, particularly in terms of social contact, and how can we perhaps help those people to train and to develop skills at the moment while they are on furlough. So I do think it's important that we consider that group of people. And even just a definition of a healthy workplace. So the World Health Organization defines a healthy workplace as one where employees and managers work together to protect and to promote their health, safety and well-being and the sustainability of the business. Because ultimately as business owners or managers it is, look, well, why do we want to even consider the well-being of our employees? It is about sustainability of the business. It makes good business sense to do this, but also from a human perspective, it makes absolute sense. So if we think about it then in terms of, well, why does it make sense from a business perspective, for an organisational perspective? And one thing is the benefits of supporting well-being are you will retain skills and you will improve staff retention. Because if we know that the number one cause of long-term absence in workplaces is stress, and if people continue to feel stressed in a workplace, then what they will eventually do is they will seek employment elsewhere. Because when the stress starts to impact on their personal lives, then there will come a point where they will have to make a call. And some people won't see that point, and what will happen then is perhaps people could have a breakdown. And so what we want to do is avoid that at all cost. So supporting well-being, psychological well-being in particular, is good in terms of retaining the skills and reducing, increasing staff retention. Reducing sickness absence. So sickness absence, stress accounts for approximately, I think, 70 million days off per year. Or sorry, sickness in the UK accounts for 70 million days off per year. So reducing sickness absence is absolutely going to have an impact on one of the other things that I've mentioned there is optimal performance. If you have people who are out sick, they won't be performing. That will put additional pressure on their colleagues to fill those gaps. Reducing presenteeism is also key, because if people are coming to work when ill, they are likely to be underperforming and perhaps making mistakes. So that's something that we would encourage people not to do. There's been a huge shift in terms of coronavirus, because clearly we do not want to encourage people to come to work if they're feeling unwell, because there is too much risk associated with that. Healthier workplaces. Up to 70% of employees feel unable to talk about mental ill health at work, because of the stigma attached to that. So if we create healthier workforces, we're having the conversation about supporting psychological well-being, then if people are able to talk more about what they're struggling with and how they're struggling, then that will ultimately increase a more open and inclusive workforce, which will result in people feeling more motivated about working in the organisation, and staff retention will also increase. So that sets out the overall context and the benefits of supporting psychological well-being. The question for all of us here is, well, how do we go about doing this? Those of you that have attended some of my recent webinars will know that I have talked about the ACT matrix. So in terms of psychological well-being, what I would be supporting is the use of the ACT matrix created by Dr. Kevin Polk. The ACT matrix comes from acceptance, commitment, training, or acceptance, commitment, and therapy. That is a psychological model, evidentially proved psychological model that does help to increase psychological flexibility. And psychological flexibility is hugely key in terms of supporting psychological health, because what we know is research tells us that psychological flexibility is the cornerstone of psychological health and well-being. And psychological flexibility, I would define as really noticing what works for an individual and living the life that they want to live, even in the presence of difficulties. And I'll explain that through the use of the ACT matrix. Again, I'm going to apologise for the inability to screen share this morning, because you now can't see the ACT matrix. But if you can imagine a vertical and a horizontal line of the matrix. So the vertical line, if we start with at the top of that line, starts with the 5 senses experience. That's the external world that we live in. So the external world that we live in, we experience with our 5 senses. So if we were to experience a coronavirus, we would experience it with our 5 senses, because we would absolutely we may have symptoms, or we could be asymptomatic. At the bottom of that line, what we have is the internal experience, and that is what goes on in the internal world. So just a question to get us started in terms of some interaction. Is anybody willing to suggest what proportion or percentage of your life are you living in the internal world at the moment? Anybody willing to, in the chat box, tell us what percentage of your time you think? Yeah, there's 75%. So a lot of people are at 70%. So what we're saying here, you are 80%. Thank you, Gail. Gail, good morning. Thank you for coming on to the webinar. So if we're saying 75 to 80% of our time, and I think most of you that are attending the webinar this morning, you are in positions of responsibility. You are leaders and managers in organizations. So, you know, if you're spending that amount of time in the internal world, you can bet your employees are. For those people who are on furlough, you can just imagine how much time they might be spending in the internal world. So in terms of the internal world and the external world, so the internal world is where the stress and then the anxiety is coming from. And in terms of dealing with this as an individual, we need to try to move from the internal world to the external world. That is spending more time in the external world. The external world being our five senses. What do I see? What do I hear? What can I touch? What can I taste? What can I smell? And it is about a reminder to do that. So I often give the example of, for those of you that were in the shower this morning, an unusual thing maybe to talk about in a webinar. But my guess is those of you, when you were in the shower this morning, were in the internal world. You were planning for your day ahead. You were perhaps thinking about the joys at the moment of working from home, homeschooling, looking after the house, all the other bits that go with just general life and life challenges. But how many of you really experienced the shower and really enjoyed it? Give your mind some time out to experience in the external world, because the more time we're spending in the internal world, we're really tiring our mind out, because that's what's working. So we want to encourage ourselves to move from the internal world to the external world. And again, the horizontal line, if we think about it, then if you imagine the horizontal line on the left side of the horizontal line is away, and on the right side is towards. So we either move towards or away from the life that we want to live. And if I start at the bottom right of the matrix and I ask the question, and what I'm going to do is just while we're talking about this, I'm going to fill the matrix here, because when I share this, it will then mean that you can see what we have been talking about, and it will become all very clear to you when if those of you that learn better visually. So if I started in the bottom right of the matrix and asked the question, in the internal world, who are the people that you think, who you believe are important to you? We could maybe use the chat box just for that. Who do you think that who are the important people to you in your life at the moment? Family. Thank you, Tony. So family is important. Partners, perhaps. Employees, your colleagues, family, friends. Hugely important, even just if we take the current context of where we're all at the moment. Family, partners, employees, friends, some people who perhaps are on their own, their pets have become more important than ever. So we started even with those few suggestions there. The people who invented Zoom, you're right, Zoom has just become a household name. So yes, all the Zoom developers have definitely played a huge part in our life. So if we then think about the bottom left of the ACT matrix now, so we're thinking about those individuals, you as an individual. The question for you in the internal world is, what internal experiences show up that you would prefer not to experience, that are unwanted? So those experiences that show up are emotions and thoughts. So those I've talked about so far this morning are stress, anxiety. What else shows up inside any emotions that you're experiencing, have been experiencing over the last 12 weeks that you'd prefer not to experience? What might those be? Sleeplessness. Okay, so our sleeping patterns coming out. Kate, I'm guessing that you're going to be feeling tired. Tony's concerned about the future. Uncertain about what the future holds. Some of you may have been a little frustrated at times about perhaps some of the guidance. Yeah, feeling of a loss of control. And worried. And if you think about all of those things, even I'd say, fear, confused. Gail, thank you. So here are some of the things that I've just put on the bottom left of the matrix for you: stress, anxiety, sleeplessness, tired, concerned, uncertain, frustrated, loss of control, worried, fear, confused. Now, when those things show up inside, what do you do? What are you aware of that you do to get rid of those feelings? So we all have auto behavior. Okay, so Kate thinks some of you will go for a walk. That's about trying to get rid of the stress. Go for a walk. What else might you do? Listen to music. Anybody been doing any retail therapy? So online shopping. Okay, have a nap. So in the top left of the matrix, what we're saying here is this is what I would see or hear you doing when those emotions show up. So gardening, reading. What else might I see or hear you doing? And I think we've all opted for some of the safe activities to share. But, you know, if you think about it, let's maybe think of some other people rather than yourselves. So drinking gin, thank you. So drinking gin may be something that you might do when you are stressed. What else might you do when you are feeling stressed to help you feel relaxed? Anything else anybody might do? Okay, so maybe talk to others. So that might be, yeah, talking to others. You know, there's been a lot of ranting lately. We've all had a good rant. And ranting is about getting rid of those feelings of stress and anxiety and frustration, perhaps. Nobody said that they felt angry in the last couple of weeks. So for some of you, there may have been a little bit of shouting because all confined, families confined to home. Some of that has been stressful, everybody being together for such long periods of time. So there may be some shouting that might go on as well. And maybe in terms of the concern and the loss of control, have any of you found yourselves working longer? So working longer hours? Yes, so definitely some now saying yes, working longer hours, not taking breaks. 100%, great. Hi, Jacqueline. Not taking breaks. Excessive screen time. And maybe anybody overreacted to anything over recent weeks? And if you think about, those are things that you're doing that you can bet the people that you're leading are all in a very similar position. They're all doing those things as well. The difficulty here with this is if we experience emotions, we prefer not to experience those, then we respond to those in a way to try to avoid or get rid of those feelings. That's why we've gone for a walk or to listen to music. But psychological flexibility is the ability to experience those emotions that we'd prefer not to experience and still to do something that moves us towards the life that we want to live. So, you know, if we think about some of those activities that you've talked about, working longer hours, not taking a break, and maybe excessive screen time, so being on your phone and on your computer, both of those for extended periods of time, will those help your well-being? Because really, if we're saying our partners, our family, our employees, and our friends are all important to us, and the one thing that we've all realized is that health's more important than ever before because we all want to stay healthy. Are those activities going to help our well-being? And the answer is no. So in terms of the sleeplessness may come from working longer hours, the stress and anxiety of perhaps workload, not taking breaks, extended periods of screen time as well. So on the right hand side really then of the ACT matrix, the top right then, what we're saying here is, what are the things that I could do that move me towards those people that are important to me? So there are some things that you've already said that we would put in here again. So going for a walk is good for our health. It's either an away or a towards move for the reason that we did it. So if the walk is about walking off frustration, then it's an away move. But if we're going for a walk because it is for health reasons, then it's a towards move. So listening to music is another towards move. What else? Trying to think, okay, so is to be positive. And that can be hard to do, Kate. Yeah, appreciate at this moment in time, being positive is something that can be hugely difficult to do, because we can see lots of other distractions that distract from being positive. So what I'm going to say here, in terms of that being positive, it is be in the external world. Try to talk to yourself. I do it. I say, Julie, you're in the internal world, move to the external world. Think about what can I do? What can I see? And that may be even sitting outside in nature, because what you can do is you can see, you can hear. Sometimes we can taste the smells in the air. So there's so much to get your external, your five senses going when we're outside with nature. Anything else anybody wants to suggest here in terms of the five senses experience? What could I do as an individual? So I could have a routine. Many people have fallen out of having a regular routine. So having a regular routine, those of you who are working longer hours and maybe not taking a break, there is an app that you can use called Stand Up. Stand Up, you program it to ping for you every so often. Some of you will have Fitbits or Apple Watches that also do the same. So encouraging yourself to get up, to go outside, to have a coffee, is to schedule that. Also, we do need exercise in terms of stress and anxiety. We do need to burn off the response, the stress response, which is the adrenaline and the cortisol. So we do need to exercise. Yeah, thanks, Tori. Have a specific workspace if you're working from home, that is conducive to working. And it also is about nutrition. So nobody said in the away moves that they were perhaps eating more. Some people talk about having put on a few corona pounds over the last 11 or 12 weeks. So, really gearing your body up for health is important. But that's just not so easy. And that's the reason now I'm going to move to the workplace scenario and move it into a different matrix. So the ACT matrix is me as an individual, and you need to understand you as the individual in terms of the human response first, before then we move to the workplace, which is the we. And the reason I say that is because what I've just said is, it's just not so easy to say I'm going to exercise, I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to eat nutritious meals, I'm going to schedule a routine, I'm going to be really good, I'm going to work in my work hours, because that's just not reality. Things distract and pull us. But what we want to do is to teach people psychological flexibility, so they're doing more towards moves than they are away moves, and that includes yourselves. So if we do that, then what we do with the pro-social matrix is the same 4 quadrants as I've talked about with the ACT matrix, only this time in the bottom left, in the internal experience, in a towards moves, we're saying what's important to the group, what's the group shared purpose. So if we think about yourselves as a group of leaders here today, What is your purpose? What's important to you in terms of psychological well-being at work? What is important to you? What's your purpose? You know, why are we doing this? If you think about what's important to you, why did you join this webinar this morning in terms of supporting psychological well-being? So, okay, I'll start off with saying our purpose is to support psychological well-being. It is certainly one of those things. So thank you. So yes, okay, so what we've now got is being resilient. So it's be resilient. So that's the objective here. In order to achieve the objectives, is to make sure everybody's happy at work. And to make sure, yeah, as far as being realistic, yes, we can't keep everybody happy all of the time, but we can certainly have a good try. So yeah, it's to continue good purposeful work. Okay, so good purposeful work is definitely one of the things that would be important to us. Really, if we think about, our shared purpose at the moment is, I think we're all here in terms of survival. And that's the problem about the stress and anxiety, because what we're all trying to do is to survive in our own jobs, to survive in life. I think, it is, we're saying well-being overall is something that to all of us that is important, is to keep everybody safe. So safety in the workplace is important. Keep everybody well. We want everybody in terms of to continue to feel motivated about that purposeful work. Anybody, any other suggestions in terms of what they think now? What is important in work in terms of that psychological well-being? So what I've said at the moment is it's about supporting psychological well-being, being resilient, having a happy workforce, good purposeful work. It's about survival. One of the things I said, but I haven't written, is it's about security for all of us, your colleagues included. So even if we use those as a few simple things to get us started, so focus on what's important for the individual, yeah, and it's achieving, Tori said there, objectives. So if those are the things that are important to us, then if we're looking at the pro-social matrix now as a collective team, then the question here then in the bottom left is, what then shows up inside team members and colleagues and yourselves? And these are very similar things to what we've just talked about. So, I could put a repeat of these in here just to help us to move along to get some of the important bits. So stress, anxiety, what other feelings might your colleagues be feeling? So frustrated, worried, angry. There might be people that are angry that they've been furloughed. There might be people that are angry that they haven't been furloughed. They feel things are unfair, and perhaps in terms of selection. They feel isolated, perhaps again, if they've been furloughed. Isolated, unfair. Anybody else? What other feelings? If you can put yourself and your colleagues concerned about, so concerned about returning to work. Those of you that are thinking about feeling concerned, one of the other webinars that I ran 2 weeks ago was about creating psychological safety in the workplace to enable that return to work. So you'll find a copy of that webinar both on my website and also here on Crowdcast. So concerned, people feeling really overwhelmed about all the tasks that they have to do, homeschooling, having the kids at home, trying to work, knowing that that's going to be the case until at least the middle of August. So even if we use those few things again to begin with, then we say, okay, so what are some of the things in terms of supporting psychological well-being at work that we as a collective team of leaders might do that move us away from creating that psychological flexibility? What are some of the things that we might do because we are feeling stressed and we're feeling anxious and we're feeling frustrated? Okay, so yeah, thanks, Kate. So we might plan for the future. Some of us might plan for the future, but actually in the scheme of things, I've got so much to do. The well-being of other people is kind of perhaps sometimes falling down the list. And so we have full intentions of doing it, but we're getting sidetracked because of the internal stuff that's showing up, the stress, the to-do list that we have, and working our way through it. So we might plan for the future, but things get in the way. What might be the reasons why many of you don't have a well-being, psychological well-being program in place at the moment? What might be the reasons for that? Anybody? Thanks. Okay, so it's maybe not deemed to be a priority. So we avoid doing anything because we have, that comes from an internal perspective of thinking that it might not be deemed an internal perspective, so I won't raise it, I won't plan it. There are more business focused priorities. So, avoidance is something that, because you'll say there are other priorities, but if you think of what we've just discussed, in the context of all of this, it's about explaining the context and why it's so important and the benefits that you're going to get from this. Because one thing that we all need support, and we all need to be able to survive this. To survive this from a physical perspective and a well-being, mental perspective, but we need our organisations to thrive and to move now into recovery. So yeah, we've pushed it to number one priority, which is great to hear, Tori. So, there may be some avoidance there. Again, if we think about some of your colleagues that may be working from home, some of what you'll see now is cameras off. Cameras are off maybe when we're having video calls or we're having team catch-up meetings. So cameras off is a response to. So why am I turning my camera off? Is that something to do with thoughts and feelings that I am experiencing? So the camera's off. It may be overreaction. We may see some people overreact to situations. We may see colleagues as well withdraw because they feel isolated already. So withdrawal, even if I go back to those furloughed people, we may see some antisocial behaviour or hear of it. And you may also see issues in terms of performance. You may see people being very indecisive. And, again, there may be people with increased sickness absence, even during this period. So those are some of the things that we may see that we would call away moves in terms of the team. But the key question here really is then, what could we do to create a more psychologically flexible workforce, really supporting psychological well-being? Please feel free to use the chat box for some of the suggestions for those things that you're already doing at the moment. There's many great things going on out there. What I'm going to do is just think about the top right of the matrix. These are towards moves in the external world. And so some of my suggestions here for you is the daily and weekly schedule. So this is definitely work on top of your work. So it's about developing a schedule to create that well-being. And so creating that schedule is having, it's coffee mornings, perhaps. I know some of you talked about that in the Leading Virtual Teams workshop or webinar that I did. So it could be coffee mornings. It could be organising online exercise classes or signposting people to those, having a schedule that you can signpost people to that you're not necessarily doing yourself. It could be practical workshops to help people develop new skills. Again, hugely important for people on furlough that we give them something to do. We give people a sense of purpose. Perhaps you could invite speakers. I appreciate for some people at the moment, it is about survival, and so finances may be short. So getting speakers, perhaps there are clients that you have that you could speak in each other's organisation, so there's a reciprocal arrangement there. Speakers that are designed to motivate, to tell stories. It could be also about a schedule in terms of developing new skills. It could be also in terms of nutrition advice. It is to help because people want to do these things, but the internal stuff's pulling them back. So, again, the exercise classes, it might be signposting to existing well-being benefits. I've talked many times about the Vitality app that I know some of you have signed up to Vitality. It's using what's available on Vitality. The fact that they've added on the Peloton app recently allows some physical activity to be done, but it's setting those schedules and reminding people of those. It might be reminding people of the employee assistance programs that you have. It is definitely for leaders. It's weekly check-ins with the team, and that is really listening. So calling those people on a weekly basis, asking them how they're doing. Remember, we all know that mental health does have a stigma attached to it. If 70% of people don't feel willing to do that, you've got to create the right environment. You've got to ask the right questions, and you've got to have weekly check-ins with people that are working from home. And that's really listening to what they're saying. One of the things is also we've talked about encourage the boundaries for work. I know lots of people have told me they find it hard to leave the desk at 5:30 because they no longer have to leave a building and go somewhere else. So as leaders, it's encouraging boundaries by role modeling. It may be for some of your colleagues who are working from home and homeschooling that they are working in the evening. So it's also maybe thinking about an email policy. So that email policy may be delaying emails so that they aren't received by those that they're sending until a later point. Or it's also, thank you, Tori, sorry, you'll be able to access a copy of the video and the slides after this. Thank you for attending. So it might be thinking about your email policy, having a message at the bottom of the email is saying, I'm sending this, but it doesn't need to be actioned now. So setting some guidance in that. It could be pulse surveys, checking in with people to find out how they're feeling. SurveyMonkey have a variety of free templates. One I've sent out recently, which is about checking in with people to see about how they feel about returning to the workplace. So that might be something that you could do. This is all about listening to people, taking their opinions up. So it may be offering financial support, financial planning. So what is available? That's something that we know is important to so many people at the moment. It's about having a good communication strategy, both with those people that are still working and those people that are on furlough. It is about signposting people to the online learning that's available. So that might be on LinkedIn. Tori's from Synergy Learning, so they do provide online packages of support. It could be, well, I'll stop for a moment as I've given a few there. Anybody like to share anything that you're doing at the moment that would be good for psychological well-being? Social connection is huge. I know some of you are having quizzes on a Friday or virtual virtual drinks via Zoom or Teams. It really is important that we are connecting both those people in a social sense who are at work and also those people on furlough. So I'm conscious that I have 1 minute to go, and I know everybody operates access to free wellness app. Yeah. So the apps would be, there's Headspace, even in terms of meditation. Some employers will provide that for free. So apps for well-being and wellness. And yeah, an informal, so a WhatsApp group to keep people connected, another great idea as well. So there are many things that you could be doing. Take a little bit of time and effort to do that, but the benefits from that will be huge. One of the things that I'd like to share just before we finish up is one of the things I've been doing is offering a series of 4 1-hour webinars to employers to offer to their employees. And those webinars are designed to help people improve psychological flexibility. So teaching them to use the ACT matrix and teaching them to think about noticing. All I've done is given you a little flavour of that today. But we do 4 1-hour workshops where they have practiced their skills in between each of the workshop, and those are over a period of 4 weeks. So those of you that are interested in that, please do get in touch. That's something that has definitely been vital. Some employers have emailed me to say even some of those programs that I would have done in a physical sense last year have been really paying off dividends in the recent 12 weeks. So that's something to consider. Those of you that have employees that are particularly struggling on an individual basis, I also do that through one-to-one coaching. So that's an option if you have somebody that's really struggling. I teach people to use the ACT matrix. Normally after session 1, people are floored at such a simple tool can have such a huge impact on somebody's life. So that is definitely an option. I'm into 11:31. I'm into your time now, so apologies for that and for the screen sharing issue. Thank you for joining me. I'd encourage you over the next couple of days and weeks is to encourage noticing what's important to team members, noticing what team members are doing to move away from that well-being. Notice both in the internal world and the external world what they're doing, and to start to notice and listen to what they think would help move the organisation into a psychologically well situation. Thank you for attending. It's been lovely to see so many familiar faces. Always good to hear from you and appreciate many of you need to drop out now. Thank you for attending, and I'll be in touch again. I'll have another webinar in 2 weeks. If you've got a suggestion for a topic, please get in touch and let me know. Thank you for attending. Take care and stay well, most importantly.